Okay, so welcome back. Today we're going to talk about some ways that you can reuse your code to make life a little bit easier and to make things more efficient. Now, if you've ever done software programming before, you've probably come to the realization that you tend to do similar functions over and over and over. So, for example, maybe you're accessing external files on your hard drive. Maybe you're connecting over the network. Maybe you're accessing databases. Maybe you're doing charts. And functions like that can often take a lot of code to do some simple things. And you tend to do things a certain way all the time. And it's nice to have your code set up so that it will recognize the way you normally do things and set everything up that way for you so that it's all ready to go. Now, recently we did some videos talking about some classes in C# Visual Studio Windows Forms that will set things up for you in that manner and allow you to very quickly do things that you normally do. For example, we talked about charts. We showed how to generate a charts class. So for example, if you're always doing line charts with certain configuration, the class is set up so that with only a couple parameters, you can tell it, hey, set up my chart that way. So the goal of this video is to show some ways that you can set things up, have blocks of code available so that you don't have to spend a lot of time, as they say, reinventing the wheel, and you can just use that code and set things up and have it customized the way you normally have things done. Now, what we've got here is some examples we've talked about in recent videos where we have taken 3 sets of functionality and generated classes to do those things. So for example, the first one here is a COM port class. So if you're doing access with data acquisition devices over the USB serial COM port, this sets things up. It tells you what ports are available and that kind of thing. Line charts, as we talked about before, doing charts in C# Visual Studio Windows Forms can get kind of tedious. To do simple things, there's a lot of code, and maybe you just want to say, hey, set up a line chart, do it this way, feed it some parameters, and that's what this class does. You just feed it some parameters, and it automatically in the background goes through and sets up your chart. Same thing if you're accessing files, like CSV text files. Here's a class that does a whole lot of that, opening and closing files and accessing them and parsing the CSV. So it would be nice to have this code somewhere that you can readily access it. You can look at it and see what it's doing and bring it into your C# Visual Studio Windows Forms application. So the first way we're going to talk about is basically what you see here. We've got these classes as text files, and I've got them open in Notepad++, where you can take a look and it automatically recognizes the C# format. And what I've got here is I've got those 3 classes as text files just in a folder. So if I want to, for example, do line charts, I've got that class. I can just double click, open it in Notepad++, and here is the line chart class, and it's all set. So this is a very nice, easy way to do it, where you've got it as a text file, and you can just copy and paste it into your project, and you're all set to go. So it's a real easy way to reuse code. Now there's other ways that we're going to talk about, and let's take a look at that. So as we said, having each class as a text file has got pros and it's got cons, as everything does in the real world. The pros are it's very easy, right? And the code is in text form. You can see it. You don't have to worry. For example, if you generate a dynamic link library, which is a class library, but it's in binary form, you can't really read it. But the nice thing about the text file is you can actually read it. Now, it could also be considered as efficient because you can just extract whatever classes you want for that particular application. So you don't have to worry about having this big library with all these classes that you don't really need. You only need like 1 or 2 of them. So it could even be more efficient. Now the cons. What are the cons of this approach? Well, if you copy and paste those classes into your new project, any projects over the years that have used that code aren't automatically updated as you update that original code. So that could be, or maybe not, but it might be a con if you want to make sure that as you update the primary code, that all of the projects that have grabbed that code will automatically be updated. So pros and cons, you might decide this is one of the better choices, maybe not. Another choice is what's called a class library project. And what that means is you take those classes and you generate what's called a class library project in Visual Studio. And then you can reference that class library project with those classes in it, just like any other C# Visual Studio Windows Forms project. But this is a special class library project, and you can access that data in that project. Now, the pros are, unlike the other choice where we had the classes as text files, the projects that use that code are referencing that primary code, which means that when you change in that project that has those classes, when you change those classes, it automatically updates the projects that are referring to it. It's automatically updated. So that's one of the major benefits of using a class library project, that it's always updated with the classes that it's referring to. Also, another benefit, like the other one, the code is in text form. You can actually look at it, because what happens is that class library, which is basically a project with all your classes that we just showed brought into your new application, it's in text form. You can just look at it. Now, the cons, maybe not as efficient. It depends on how you use it. But if you have a class library project that's got a bunch of classes in it, maybe for a particular application you don't need all of those classes. Maybe you only need 1 out of 20, but you're bringing them all into your project. So maybe not as efficient. Maybe it is, but it's up to you to decide. But definitely it's not as easy as just, taking a text file, copying and pasting into a project. Here you have to do some setup, and we're going to talk about this next, how you can set up a class library project so that any projects that refer to it are automatically updated. There is some work involved, so you may decide it's not as easy and not desirable, but we're going to show you how to do it. So now in Visual Studio, we're going to generate 2 projects. The first project is going to be solely a class library project, and the only thing it's going to do is hold whatever classes we decide we want to use, whatever utility classes that we want to access. So the second project is going to be our actual project, like a user interface project or a console application. And that second project is going to reference the first project and just access the various classes and functions in that first project. So the first project, we're going to do create a new project. And what we want to do is we want to look at a class library project. So we can go up here and type class library, and we're going to select a class library for .NET Framework. We talked before about how I use .NET Framework because it supports charts and comports and that kind of thing. So we're going to select a class library for .NET Framework, hit Next, and we'll just call it Class Library, and hit Create. And here we have our class library. Now you can see all it's got in it is a class 1. We're going to delete that, and we're going to add our own class. So we're going to right-click, Add, New Item, Class, and we'll call it CSV read write.cs. And now we've got the same class name that we showed before. And here's our CSV read write. And all we have to do is select the entire class in our notepad. We'll do copy and then go back here and Control V to paste. And now we've got our class that we had before. Now keep in mind that we're going to have some using statements and references to make this all work. We're accessing the open file dialog, so we have to use systemwindows.forms, and you can see now everything's okay, and we have this CSV read write class that we can now access with any other project. We can do the same thing for the others, but let's see how we can now use this in a second project, and we'll just reference the CSV read write. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click Visual Studio, and we're going to create a new project. This is going to be a Windows Forms application, .NET Framework. And we do have to make sure that the .NET Framework versions match in both of these applications. We'll talk about that in a bit. But we're going to do a Windows Forms app.NET framework, and we'll do class library UI test and hit create. And now we've got our blank application. Hit F7 for the code. And now we have to figure out how we can reference that other project. So what we can do is we can go to this solution, right click, add, and we'll say existing project, and we'll go to the class library we just generated. We'll select the class library.csproj and hit open. And now you can see it has added that class library in our solution. So now we've got our new UI and the class library. Now, in order to access this class library in our solution, in order for this new UI project to access it, we're going to have to add a reference. And we'll select the UI project, add reference, and here it gives us the opportunity of adding that class library as a reference. So we'll hit OK. And now the last thing we have to add to our UI test project is a using statement so that we can use this class library. So we're going to say using class library, and now we should be all set to go where we can reference that. So I'm going to double click on this CSV read write, and you can see it is a public class, so we're going to have to instantiate it. So I'm going to say CSV read write CSV equals new CSV read write, and we can now access the methods in that class. So let's take a read file method where we feed it the initial directory as a string, and we'll see if that works. So we can say csv.readFile, and we'll say d:, and we'll run this and see if it works. And you can see it brings up the open file dialog for the D directory, just as we expected. So with that, we now have access to what's ever in this class library class, and we can add more classes. We just got to make sure we set it up as we showed. So now those are just a couple ways that you can improve your efficiency and reuse some code. In the upcoming video, we're going to talk about something called templates, which allow you to set up a project, a solution in the way that you like, using whatever classes you normally use and the configuration you normally use. Save that as a template. Then next time you can just open up that template. It's ready to go with your custom configuration. So that's about it for this one. If you like any of these videos, I encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notifications. But most of all, please let others know that we're here so we get some views. Really appreciate it. Otherwise, take care. Have a really good day. Thanks.